After months of debate about the pressure that record migration is having on everything from the Auckland property market to a lack of pay rises, the government has cut its permanent residency target by 5%. Obviously, our political editor, Jane Patterson, looked at this at the top of the program tonight. The changes will see the higher end of the planning range for new migrants for the next 2 years reduced to 95,000 from 100,000, so a reduction of 5%. Skilled migrants will now need to have 160 points, up from 140, to gain residency, and the number of people allowed entry under the family category will be more than halved to 2,000. There will also be a temporary ban on applications under the parent category. Immigration Minister Michael Woodhouse explains the thinking behind the changes.
In the last couple of years, it's been a maximum of 100,000 over the 2-year period. We've announced that it's broadly going to continue at 95,000. But because there is a significant demand on those residence places, we are going to have to lift the skill bar for those skilled migrant category visas that are so necessary for a growing economy.
Right, so the net effect will be roughly a 5% reduction.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. We haven't typically met the planning range over those years, but last year there was a significant spike, particularly in the partnership area, parent category and skills. So we're going to have to moderate that a bit in order to be able to keep the long-term average going through.
Minister, this is a response, isn't it, to ongoing pressure for reductions. Treasury in May, for example, talking about the pressures immigration was putting on wages, holding them down, and housing, driving prices up. And in July, unusually, the Reserve Bank explicitly addressed the impact of record net immigration on housing prices. Why has it taken so long to respond?
Well, firstly, what we also have, balancing that narrative, is a very strong demand for skills. So we have an aggressively growing economy, and yes, while there are infrastructure concerns, particularly in Auckland, when I visit places like Blenheim and Southland and Te Puke, where there is very strong growth in our primary industries, they're crying out for more skilled workers. So we need to balance those two competing objectives. Yes, we have a strong growing economy and we have concerns about infrastructure. I think these decisions reflect that balance.
The Prime Minister says that these really are just changes at the margins. Are you window dressing here? My understanding is that internal National Party polling tells you that Winston Peters is making real headway with the immigration issue. Yeah. Are you trying to look like you're doing something without really doing something?
No, not at all. In fact, I think this is an important change which reflects those two things. Look, the strong net migration and the demand for residence, I think, is a measure of success, not failure. The fact that so many people want to come to New Zealand, so many New Zealanders want to return, were it in reverse, I think we'd be having an entirely different and more negative conversation. But it is necessary from time to time to tweak those policies, as the Prime Minister says, at the margins, to make sure that we've got the settings right.
So this is a tweaking at the margins?
Yeah, look, I think so. There's a small change to the number of parent category visas that will be issued over the next couple of years. We're broadly continuing the number of skilled migrants that will come in, but because of that extra demand, we're going to need to raise the points threshold. That will make sure that the really high-level skills that we're in short supply on, things like software engineers, IT workers more generally, registered nurses in aged care, they'll still be able to come in, but we might see fewer residence visas granted in areas like hospitality and retail, for example.
Do you accept that there are pressures on infrastructure and property prices as a result of the number of immigrants settling in Auckland?
I think the number of immigrants settling in Auckland is having some effect on infrastructure, but Treasury has said, and I agree, and the government agrees, that overwhelmingly this is a supply-side issue, and particularly in respect of housing, which requires a supply-side response.
Is the elephant in the room here that, in fact, immigration is making growth look better than it would otherwise be, and is making the economy look more buoyant than it would otherwise be, and you don't actually want to tamper with it very much at all?
No, I don't accept that, and I think the more accurate way to describe this is not that the economy is growing because of immigration, but labour demand is high because of a growing economy. Now, we can't meet that labour demand domestically only, and so we are going to have to go to the international labour market now and for the foreseeable future. But I don't accept that a material reason for the growth in net GDP is immigration as a policy. Immigration and migration is a response to that demand.
Is this the end of it? You're going to have, what, 12 months or somewhat less than that between now and the next election, and Winston Peters and the Labor Party are going to be pushing immigration numbers. Will there be more? Is the 5% reduction going to be the end of it?
Well, in residence, I think for the next 2 years, yes, but there is work to be done in the settings around temporary visas. So there is certainly an issue around the growing number of people who have been in New Zealand for a long period of time with no pathway to residence. Now, last year the Prime Minister announced a plan to give a limited pathway to people in the South Island who have been here for several years, who might not otherwise be able to stay. But the corollary policy there that needs to be worked on is to ensure that in clearing that stuck group through, that we don't create the conditions that enable more people to get into that situation. So I am reviewing temporary visa settings, and I expect to be making an announcement in the not too distant future.
So when do you think that will be?
Well, the policy is being worked on now. It could be either side of Christmas, but certainly I'd like it to be in the next 6 months or so.
Minister, with an election approaching in the next 12 months or so, how are we able to have conversations around immigration numbers without descending to xenophobia on the one hand, or without accusing people of xenophobia who want to discuss immigration levels?
Oh, look, I think we're doing that right now. The overwhelming majority of New Zealanders understand the need for good immigration and migration policies. Remember, 1 in 4 New Zealanders, 1 in 3 Aucklanders were not born here in New Zealand, so we are a country of migration. I think we do need to have sensible conversations about making sure we do have the balance right between Kiwis and non-New Zealanders, but there is the politicisation that you describe is going to go on, because there are some members of Parliament who believe that there is a place for that thinly veiled xenophobia. I'm pleased to note, in my view, that that is a reducing cohort of people for whom that narrative resonates, and I hope that continues to diminish.
Michael Woodhouse, the Minister, talking to us earlier this afternoon.